Trumpism ultimately has a pretense that libertarianism doesn't. That it's about that it feels the sort of pain of salt of the earth people in the heartland who might have lost their jobs, or even if they still have their heads above water right now, or worried that they won't in the future, and who are feeling precarious and insecure. It appeals to these people, and it says we're on your side, and we're going to help you, and we're not like those nasty globalist elites, we are in your corner, and I think that's just fundamentally bullshit, and that these people actually have no program whatsoever that helps any of those people in concrete terms, and that's exactly the case that I want to make in the debate with Kirk if it ended up happening. And this all leads us into the last thing we want to cover tonight, which is this controversy that it was never that dormant, but it just erupted again a little bit over the weekend because of these tweets from Cenk Uygur, who's of course the founder of the Young Turks, and also one of the key founders of Justice Democrats, which got the Squad elected. And Cenk's politics are not my politics, but I also feel like those two things that I just mentioned are real and important contributions, and you should keep a respectful tongue in your mouth when you critique it, which is not to say that you should be above criticism either. But depending on what he means, though, right? There are two ways of reading this. I think he might be importantly wrong about this. So let's bring up the tweets. I think there are three of them. All right, so this is the first one. Cenk says, social issues are really important and worth fighting over. So far, so good. But maybe the left wing and right wing should consider uniting on economic issues against corporate rule. We agree on a lot more than people realize on these issues. Then we can go back kicking each other's ass. Next. Okay, he continues. People on the left need to stop assuming that our side would immediately get duped by the right wing into voting for some racist fascist. Sure, be extremely cautious, but what if we tricked them into voting to raise their own wages or giving themselves free health care? And then I think there's one more. Okay, I don't want anyone thinking I'm telling people to vote Republican. Their politicians are the worst people on earth. And you don't hold hands with extremist groups. With extremist groups, you obviously fight them. But what if there are right-wing voters who also hate corporate rule and corruption? Now, the reason that I said there's a way of reading him that makes him very wrong about this is that if not for that last sentence, I would say that I unambiguously disagree with everything he's saying in these three tweets. But that last sentence creates some ambiguity and opens up a way of reading him where he's actually right. Because there are two things that I think need to be separated here. But Cale, it looked like you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, it's from those tweets, I don't know what he thinks the right and the left are. Just definitionally, I don't know what he's referring to. Because my definition of the right and the left is the left are those people that are advancing the interests and the political priorities of working people. And the right are those people that are, for the most part, actively, if not sometimes passively, but mostly actively opposing the rights of working people at the behest of corporations and of capitalists and of kind of maintaining profitability for these companies and capitalists to continue. That's what those two things mean. In 2021, it's what it's meant for a long time. It's not quite the definition of the French Revolution, but that's basically where we've been for a very long time. I think with Cenk, he's not referring to that, when he says the left and the right. I think a lot of it has to do with just people who agree with left-wing ideas and people who agree with right-wing ideas. But even still, I don't know what in his mind left-wing and right-wing ideas are, because he says, okay, there's left-wing and right-wing cultural ideas, but they can agree on economics. But no, they can't, because there is no like working class right wing ideas that are like to the benefit of working class people. Like the economic program of the right has been, continues to be unambiguously, even despite what like Hawley and others like say around the issue, when they get to the issue, still remains the case that like they're anti-union, they're anti-workers having greater control in the workplace, of having greater democratic rights broadly. They do not want working people to have greater power in society. And so I just don't, I don't really like it. I would be curious to know what he thinks the left and the right are, because to me it's not clear what in those tweets.
I'm thinking it's a bit like because he talked about voters, and I think a lot, to be fair to Cenk here, I'm trying to not jump down his throat, because I do agree with Ben, like it isn't clear in the tweets, but like I think what he's trying to get at is like the people who were like for Bernie Sanders and then voted for Trump because Bernie Sanders lost. And there, I've actually talked to some of those people like in person. They existed. But and I think that he's trying to come up with a way of like less polarization. Again, I'm being very fair with this. But I'm not quite sure he's quite articulating it, and I also don't quite see from his like what he's laying out, like how to get to this ideal that he's kind of talking about.
Yeah, since the tweets are ambiguous, which is probably part of why they cause so much of a splash on left Twitter, because if something is like talking about super controversial subjects, but it's not totally clear how to understand it, I think and it comes from somebody with a very big platform, that's sort of the perfect storm, right, for everybody spending the weekend talking about it. So I want to step away a little bit from the question of what he meant by it, and just talk about like what's actually true about the underlying subject, right? Because like the last sentence suggests that he might have meant something I agree with. The first couple of tweets and the first part of the last tweet, without that last sentence, suggest something I disagree with, right? I mean, which is pretty much the thing that I disagree with, like Glenn Greenwald on, for example, that I argued with him about a little bit when I was on System Update, and that we've talked about. We did a segment about on the show in between the first and second time, that he came on, which is not that I think that Glenn has like socially reactionary views. I don't at all, right? I mean, I think that his whatever criticisms I have of him or whatever disagreements we have, I mean, I don't at all think that he's like anti-choice about abortion or wants to dissolve his own marriage or anything like that. But that he thinks, well, okay, we have these important disagreements about social issues, and of course we're gonna have to fight about those, but meanwhile there are these things that we can come together on. And I think my big question, and this maybe echoes what Cale's saying, is who's the we, right? Like because I think the thing that's true, and this gets to Andy's point, is that there are a segment of voters who are culturally conservative, might vote Republican, but who have positions on a lot of bread and butter issues that are pretty far to the left, maybe further to the left than the voters themselves realize when they try to think about how what they think maps on to partisan divisions. And there's plenty of polling evidence for this, right? There are big chunks of Republican voters who are friendly to the idea of raising the minimum wage. There's like about half of Republican voters who like the idea of Medicare for all. Like this is all unions. Yeah, unions, right? I mean, yeah. what we were talking about with Nathan Robinson when he was on the show, that like when like Ben Shapiro's video bashing unions is full of comments from people who are Ben Shapiro fans who are like, well, I don't know about this, right? Because like, I am, or my brother-in-law is, or my dad was, a member of a union, and it actually really helped him a lot, and there are tons of people on a grassroots level who have combinations of views like that. That's true, right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, this was always part of what I thought was a good argument for Bernie. I mean, like a good pragmatic argument for Bernie that, as a matter of fact, Biden got lucky, and there was this global plague, which meant that a ham sandwich, more or less could have beaten Trump. But failing that, Biden might have lost, and most of the other candidates, would have lost. But Bernie was able, and again, there's lots of polling evidence for this. There are people who would have voted for Bernie who might have otherwise voted for Trump. I mean, that's just true. And like, we've all probably talked to one or two people who fall under that description. Like, and it's always a little confusing, but it's like that, whatever. It's like voters like that totally exist. And it's on a certain level, it makes sense, because there are, in the absence of people thinking that anybody's really representing their interests, it's very easy for people to sort of default to voting based on culture war issues, or just sort of regional affinities, or who watches what cable news networks. Yeah.
Which, like, if your conception of politics is entirely just like morals, it's like it's a moral scale. It's all about morality. Then that person is abhorrent. But if you actually care about like redistributing wealth and power to working class people, like, then that fucking rules. That Bernie can pull like people who today understand themselves as conservatives and would say, yeah, I'll vote for the guy who openly calls himself a democratic socialist because he's making sense when it comes to like healthcare or corporations. That fucking rules.
No, absolutely. They're willing to do it, despite the fact they probably take some correct socially progressive positions they don't like. Yeah. So great. Awesome. But the other half of this, and where I do think that Glenn is wrong, and where I do think that Cenk might be wrong, depending on how he means some of this, I'm not sure, is that everything we just said was about voters. Mm-hmm. That is a very, very different subject from politicians or even like mass media pundits. And on that level, so-called right-wing economic populism just doesn't exist. It's a myth. That it's just not true that there are that there are Republican, like, just to be like brass tacks, right? It's not true that there are like Republican politicians who are in, like, probably there aren't even any in state legislatures. Definitely there aren't any in Congress who have economically redistributionist politics, but are also, socially reactionary, whatever. Those people don't exist, even on the level of mass media. People who this is often claimed of, like Tucker Carlson's total bullshit. Like, Tucker Carlson, I mean, this is why I told Kelly at the beginning of the main show, yeah, I'd love to do an episode about Tucker Carlson, because, oh, you're muted, Andy.
I have artwork ready for you for that episode.
Okay, excellent.
A lot on the drawing board for that one.
Yeah. And why I would love to do an episode about Tucker Carlson is because I think that Tucker Carlson is a total con man on this stuff. Like, he goes out of his way to rhetorically position himself as on the side of the working class, or at least the native-born working class. He doesn't particularly pretend to be on the side of like the poorest working class people who come in from Mexico or point south, to try to get jobs. But at least when it comes to the native-born working class, he pretends to be on their side, but he's just not If you look at his, I mean, I did a video with, Cale produced for Jacobin last year.
Jacobin magazine.
Yeah.
we had Cornel West on and he kept calling it Jacobin.
Not Jacobian.
I mean, that might be what's going in his head. I don't know, but it was very endearing. We appreciate it that he kept saying Jacobin is an important voice on the left.
Nice. Got to get Brother Cornell on this show, by the way. But I'd actually
do your impersonation of him.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
But no, we did the right wing populism piece a couple months ago, and like specifically on like Bannon and Hawley, because like just such they are they're con men, and this is what I said a moment ago, like they can get away with this because like when they actually do talk about labor and like worker power, it's odious and reactionary, but they don't talk about that. Like, and that's, and in that way, like, they're not any different than like any other Republican, which is like selling you a horrible, terrible political platform or project. But they just don't talk about like the, 75% that's just like so clearly, obviously like terrible. And, that's going to be to the worse off of most working people. And they're going to focus on like the 25% that like rallies people up.
No, exactly. So, like, brass tacks, does Tucker Carlson support raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour even, which, by the way, is at this point the official position of Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer? Nope, he does not. There are plenty of clips where he says the opposite, that this is a terrible, ridiculous idea. So Tucker Carlson, nope, doesn't support, $15 an hour minimum wage. Does Tucker Carlson support Medicare for all, which according to some polls, a slight majority of Republican voters, and even if you think that's too optimistic, there are plenty of other polls, a very solid minority, like well over 40% do. Mm-hmm. Nope. He certainly does not support that, to put it mildly. Does Tucker Carlson support changing laws to make it easier to join labor unions? If so, it's a well-guarded secret. Like he doesn't support any of this stuff. Like he's just a Republican. Like that thing, like he's maybe if you compare him to the 2012 Mitt Romney self-deportation position on Mexican immigration, he's maybe a more full-throatedly xenophobic Republican, right? Mm-hmm. But the core of his politics, like, no, he's not fundamentally different. Like his economic views are not fundamentally different from Mitt Romney or John McCain or Lindsey Graham, who I guess is now a Trumpist. That one example's complicated, but like any of these people, right? Like it's all just standard George W. Bush republicanism on economic on economic issues. There's a segment that Tucker did, which we'll certainly get into if we do the episode and play, that has often been brought up as evidence. Oh, look at this segment where Tucker is bringing up and agreeing with, this Elizabeth Warren thing about economics.
Yeah, notable member of the left, Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, well, exactly. But like the Elizabeth Warren thing he's agreeing with is all about economic patriotism, so you can see why Tucker would like that formulation. And so it's like attacking corporations that outsource for their lack of economic patriotism. Okay, great. Concretely, what are we going to do to stop them from doing that? And like the only real, like the only like actually like redistributive kind of proposals at the end of that Elizabeth Warren thing he's proposing are like, we should have more apprenticeship programs. I mean, it's so milquetoast. It's just unbelievable. And like, if you look at, the stuff we got into in that video for Jacobin, like look at like fucking Steve Bannon, who, by the way, this is why I always love this point that Michael made on TMBS about how great it was that he went on Red Scare, because the Red Scare girls actually pushed him on, if you're such a populist, why don't you support Medicare for all? And Bannon like if you actually listen closely to what he advocates, it's like basically he wants to, like, if Steve Bannon had gotten everything he wanted in the Trump administration, which of course he didn't because he was outflanked from the right on these issues, but if he'd gotten absolutely everything that he wanted economically out of the Trump administration, that would have meant like putting the top marginal tax rate back like to close to what it had been when Bill Clinton was president. That's that socialist utopia we all remember, and spending some of the money on infrastructure. That would be about it. Like no minimum wage raise, nothing really to give everybody health care, none of this stuff, because it's all bullshit. Like these people are just complete con artists. You can find individual examples of like, okay, Josh Hawley, wanted to give people, direct payments rather than, whatever tax scheme credit, was being floated at the time. And okay, great, whatever. I mean, and Bernie Sanders wants to work with, some Republican senator who has a conjecturally good position on something like that. Fantastic, go for it. But the idea that in their core economic views, any of these people are populist or somehow converge with the views of the social democratic left is just complete nonsense. They have, every single one of these motherfuckers has economic positions that actually put them to the right of Biden and Pelosi and Schumer.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I wanted to, if you don't mind, I wanted to make one more comment that's specific to
please.
Jake's distinctions. And there's a couple comments in the live chat that I wanted to refer to. Because I think the very good patrons get it. Because I think Dave's right about this, more or less, that like a post 68 liberal probably, and this is in part because the left was actually like defeated and destroyed. So like the most that we like associate with the left are just like the outcomes of victories of like the new left generation in like civil rights and environmentalism, and like people, like the fact that it just so transformed the zeitgeist that it's like, well, yeah, of course, like that the left gave us that, and we're going to completely get rid of like what the left was that in fact got us that. But and so I think that's where Silver's comment, Silver said, I think Cenk is still in the mindset that progressive equals left and Republican equals right is like probably true. I mean, I don't want to make a claim about Cenk's personal beliefs. I don't know, but just based on the tweet, if this is how he understands the world, I mean, it's really not that different than like the rest of mainstream media. And they're completely disconnected from like how actual politics happens in the world. And for the record, again, if Cenk thinks that social democracy is the win state, then like I'm not far from that. Like I'm a socialist, but like I would like social democracy. That'd be pretty tight. Okay, but then there's the last comment I'll pull up. Sorry, I'm just doing a little comment.
Let's do it.
That's good.
That Yoda had written to read Cenk charitably, the working class folks my dad is friends with who are also racist against other ethnic whites but believe they are workers could be useful to us. I think that's like, I think the statement is true, and if that's what Cenk means, then sure, like that's like, yeah, like you want to win over people who have bad ideas in their head, because you could say these people are workers that have certain common interests, and like let's form a political alliance on those interests. But I don't know if we can read Cenk's. I don't want to say we can't read Cenk favorably in that way, because I think Cenk would probably agree with what I just said and what I'm about to say. But the tweet itself is worded in a way that's like unfortunate, because it says that oh wait, no, it's not this one. Sorry, this middle tweet. This is the second tweet. That the left won't get immediately duped by the right wing, but that we can trick the right into raising wages or giving them health care. And this is, I think, like this is a major fundamental flaw with like this political approach to politics, that like if you think you're going to trick someone into voting for something that they have an interest in, it says a little bit more about like how you view these people, like from the get-go, that these are people who don't know, you know, what their interests are, who are like, and like I think it ends up like, again, not saying this is Cenk's argument, I'm extrapolating from like what this politics can morph into, but then it's not, you can end up with something not too different from like the Hillary Clinton like basket of deplorables, where it's like these people are just like irredeemably stupid and mean, and the only way you can get them to get some, you know, to have, you know, to be a part of something good in society is if like you, the smart people, trick them into doing something good. And that's just not how socialists think about politics. Like we say working class people, because they're a worker, because they don't own the means of production, they don't, like when they go into work, they don't call the shots. They get bossed around. They told when and if they get a bathroom break and where to stand and who they can and can't talk to and whether or not they have a break room. And certainly because they do not get any decision for the most part. And like in a typical company, they do not get a decision with regard to like the profit that came in that week, month, year, whatever. Like because of that objective material circumstance, it will make it rational that those people would say, yeah, I would like greater control over my workplace. I would like to have my healthcare not to be tied to my employment and to be guaranteed as a social right. I would like education to be way more accessible and not determined by, you know, if whether or not you can pay. That childcare should be guaranteed. Like that political program ends up becoming something that meets certain materialist circumstances that people are in. And what socialists say and have said, like for 150 years, more or less, is that is how you organize people and you bring them together. It's on those principles. And through that process of common solidarity around their interests, you can then deal with these other aspects of like unsavory or like downright like disgusting and bigoted ideologies, you know.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to say earlier. You know, where there was the chat about the people who understand themselves to be workers, but you know have racist ideas, maybe even towards other white ethnic groups. You know, cue the scene in Gran Torino at the barbershop. Yeah. The thing is, it's not just that, like, yes, if you can get somebody who has disgusting ideas in their head to unite with other people to achieve something economic, that's like just good because it's going to have really good consequences in the material world. Although that is the most important point here, and like by far the most important. But also as a secondary point, like to the extent that your goal is to change the ideas in people's heads, right? That like which I think like, yeah, I'd like to live in a world where, people, where people have less bigoted, attitudes towards each other. I don't. Okay, I think that the history of the labor movement shows pretty unambiguously that one of the most effective means for accomplishing that, it's certainly not like disowning people and denouncing them. The track record of that is pretty dismal, right? That just hardens lines. But like I think the history of the labor movement shows that one of the most effective means for doing that is like to organize unions and have people be involved in strikes and other collective efforts that lead them to work together with people who are different from them, which, whatever, doesn't mean that everybody is like ideally enlightened by the end of the process. That's probably not on the cards, but like it does tend to help people humanize each other, to have that sort of solidaristic action, towards their common interests. Like I think that's just true, historically, right? I mean, like I always tell people to watch the James Earl Jones movie Mattawan, about the miner strikes in West Virginia, for a great depiction of this.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, you just, again, I think like I think I ended last week's post game with like a similar kind of like, this is what the left should be thinking about, but like, sorry, this is what you get. But it's like, you should, like, the left fundamentally should start with the premise that like most working people get so much disrespect heaped on their head day after day, week after week. Like, society treats most working class people of all ideologies like shit. And so like, you want to like get working people to come over to your side, like treat them like a full human being, like a person who in fact does deserve these rights, and say, listen, I don't agree on you with certain things, and I will fight you on certain things. But like when it comes to like the fundamental questions of like who owns what and who has to do what for whom, like you have so much more to gain by like, you know, pursuing collective means and collective strategies to advance our interests. That and that's just like, that's like what distinguishes like a good organizer from a bad one, is that like a good organizer understands how to deal with people who don't agree with them, and say like, you know, that their first reaction to someone who has like a bad idea isn't to be like, well, fuck you, I guess I'm never talking to you again. Like, or like to cancel them or something. It's like, okay, well, you know, you're a coworker in this plant with me, so like, let's talk about this. Like, and it might be, you know, you might end up being like, you know, drunk at the bar late at night being like, you fucker, you stupid fucker. But like at that point it should be like drunk like in jest. Like it shouldn't be like the point is that like you actually do want to find like, you know, you do want to build relationships on common ground when it comes to politics. And you don't have to like these people as like, you don't have to be your friends. Like, you don't organize because you're trying to make friends. Like, that's a different social process. So like, make your friends however you want to make your friends, and, you know, don't be dicks to your friends. But then like when it comes to like organizing, or like political organizing, whether it's like in a union or like around a campaign, knocking on a door for Bernie or something, like, hear people out, try to understand where they're coming from, assume that like, you know, they're a decent person like you and me, and see where you can like, you know, pull them closer to your politics through like appealing to them on their interests.
Yeah, absolutely. You have been watching a free public preview for a patron exclusive episode of Give Them an Argument. To get the rest of this episode, plus patron exclusive episodes every single Thursday, as well as patron exclusive post games after the regular show every Monday night, and a lot more, head over to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. As a friend of mine used to put it, why be foolish?